Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the virtual Agile Shift. Before we start, I want to inform you about a feature in this presentation that'll help make this session a little more interactive. Please let me direct your attention to the question mark icon at the upper right of the presentation screen. If you click that icon, it will open the question and answer chat. From there, you'll be able to send me any questions you have, and Sesh will answer any that we have time for at the end of the session. Just as a reminder, you can enter your questions at any time as they occur to you during the course of the session. So with that said, let me introduce today's presenter. Sesh is an Agile leader at Enbridge, and today he's going to share how Agile helps drive innovation at the Enbridge Technology and Innovation Lab. Sesh?
Thank you, Nat. Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me clearly. It's good to be here. And I want to thank you for your time and your attention today for this conversation we're going to have about the innovation of the Enbridge Technology and Innovation Lab. So before I get started, a quick safety moment for everybody to just keep an eye on. As you know, corona cases are increasing, and so please practice safety measures such as sanitizing your hands, wearing gloves when you need to, making sure you always have a mask on when you go out, and practice social distancing. More tips are on the WHO site for reference. So I want to start with a quick story. When I first accepted this talk, and okay, let's actually have this presentation. My focus was initially all about, let's talk about how Agile helps innovation build great products at Enbridge T+IL. And then as I started going through the planning phase of it, and as the time shifted from February to March and April, I realized that what I was trying to say was great. There's nothing wrong with that, but it was much more of a deterministic, almost like a prescriptive look at things. And with COVID affecting things and changing the way we work and the way we live, the way we behave towards each other now, I figured a change of narrative was required. And so I saw a fork in the path and I took it, right? So the goal was, how do I convey the human nature of things that we do? How do I convey that innovation comes from human beings primarily, who are enabled by other systems, such as Agile, for example. And so what are the ways of thinking? What is the mindset? How should we approach these things so that we can develop better innovation? So the arc of the story, or the trajectory of the story, changed quite a bit from what it was when I originally planned it back in February or March to what it is now. So I just wanted you to have the background that the conversation has evolved tremendously in my mind about what I'm going to speak about today. So on the outline, we'll talk about Enbridge very quickly. We'll talk about innovation at the T+IL, which is the core of today's conversation. The people aspect of it, what are the methods, mindsets, and values we look at? How do we stay connected through this adversity that everybody's facing? And how do we measure what matters? What are some things we should look for? And how do we measure those intangible sometimes things? And finally, how do we unlock value? All of these have to result in some outcome for our business, for our users, for our customers. And that is necessarily unlocking of the key value that they're looking for. So how do we do that? And that's the ultimate outcome we are driving at. All of these things are a setup towards making our customers, our users, and our employees and ourselves and our organization successful at the end. Quick look at Enbridge. 25% of North America's crude oil is transported by Enbridge, as well as 20% of natural gas is consumed in the US, and some other statistics that will kind of give you an idea of the scale of what Enbridge actually does. In terms of technology, there are two different divisions or two different ways of thinking. The asset operation technologies, which is about the equipment, the sensors and the materials, and advanced materials, and those sort of things. And the digital technologies, which is all about cloud computing, predictive analytics, AI, ML, all of those sort of things. So it's two different types of technologies that we look at. And that's what we're going to look at in terms of what the lab does in marrying some of these together. I want to kind of set up the definition of innovation first. How do we define innovation? There are lots of ways to define it, of course. The definition I really like the most, the one that resonates with me, is by David Neeleman, who is one of the ex-CEOs of JetBlue. So he said, it's a way to do something better than it's ever been done before. And I think that is a very short but very impactful statement. It makes a lot of sense what innovation is about. It's about making the lives of people better. It's about making things better for everyone around us. So innovation should serve some need, and that's what makes an innovation so valuable is that it serves a need, fulfills a need, improves the way things are done. But for innovation to happen, there are certain things that are required. And this is where the presentation has shifted a lot from what it was before. So I'm talking less in terms of Agile and much more in terms of the other supporting ingredients that are there, including Agile, of course, but we'll get to that shortly. Um, so in our experience, based on what we've seen succeed, what we've seen work, there are a few things that we need to get right for innovation to ultimately work. The first is our people. Needless to say, people are the drivers and creators and makers and requesters and demanders of innovation. So people are necessary in terms of they are the ones that actually make all of this happen. The second aspect, you can hire the right kind of people, you can hire the right fit, the right talent, but you also have to give them the right kind of tools, methods, and techniques and systems and equipment. All of those things are necessary, right? But they have the right frameworks that they can leverage to make innovation happen. We can't forget the mindset, which is all sorts of different aspects go into what is an agile mindset, what is a product mindset, what is an innovation mindset, what's a quality mindset. There are different kinds of mindsets that are necessary. And so how do we fuel that? How do we feed that? How do we make sure that mindset is being pervasive and pervaded across the entire organization? What does that look like? And needless to say, technology, value of technology is necessary to understand how that can drive the outcomes you want. Ultimately, you want an enabler that can take you from conception, the idea, to commercialization, into the hands of the customer. And that media or the medium is usually some kind of technology. So we have to understand what technologies are at play, how they're useful, and where and when we should leverage them judiciously. And fifth and most important aspect is culture. So when you put these things together in terms of people, the frameworks and systems and methods, the mindset, the technology, and the culture, you would then create an environment that results in innovation happening. What we don't want to blindly chase is innovation. Innovation is a result of getting all of these other things right. So if you get these basic things right, innovation is a natural outcome of that. High performing teams is a natural outcome of that. So when we seek to build the right foundation of things, the right things, in this case, people and mindsets and all of these other things, we are creating this environment where people can feel comfortable. They feel empowered, they feel successful, they feel autonomous, they feel like they can accomplish these things. They have everything they need at their disposal to make this a success. And so innovation is a result of getting all of these things right. About the lab itself, there are three different locations. There's Houston, there's Calgary, and then there's Edmonton, and about 115, 120 people across these three locations. People are obviously our most important asset, and I'll cover a few things as I go down the line in the presentation on how we do certain things to keep connected, how we value our people, and what are some things that we do. I think that will kind of shed some light on the way the lab works, what we value, and how we value our people. So one thing I do want to point out here is the interview process itself. To get the right people in and to make sure we are empowering them, we want to make sure that there are four kinds of interviews. There's the domain, craft, leadership, and fit. So all of these four kinds of interviews help us understand holistically what the person is about. It's not just about skills. You can train anybody to pick up skills, right? But you have to make sure the person has the right attitude, they have the right mindset, they have the right approach towards problem solving. They are adaptable. They understand the nature of change. They can adapt to change, and they can also drive change. So those leadership skills, those craft and domain skills, and the fit for the lab, all of these are necessary to ensure we are getting the right people into the lab. The second thing I talked about was all of the supporting methods that you give your employees, which is methods and mindsets. I was reading this book called "What's Your Problem?" by this author, Thomas Wettlesborg. In that, he talks about how companies spend billions upon billions of dollars with a B on solving the wrong problems. Right? They solve the wrong problems, and that is why they lose so much money. So one of the first things to know is, are we solving the right problem? Are we focused on the right problem? So towards that, we use design thinking, which is one of the primary drivers of understanding, are we solving the right problem? Are we focused on the right people who actually want this problem solved? So if you have read about design thinking, you know it's a lot of it is about human-centered nature. It's driven by empathy. It's all about people and their pain points and concerns and issues and problems that we want to solve. So when you start with design thinking, you lay down the idea of exactly what it is you're trying to solve. What is the specific problem or nature of problem you're trying to solve? Once you identify that, well, half your battle is won. right? It's solving the wrong problem that causes problems. But when you solve the right problem, or you focus on the right problem, you know all of your efforts are concentrated and focused on that one thing and one thing alone. Once you know what you're trying to solve, the next step is taken into agile delivery and mindset, which is, as you know, it's iterative, incremental, collaborative in nature. There's continuous feedback built in, and quality is baked in from the beginning. So agile leads to a culture of innovation, and we'll talk about some of those aspects later. But the idea here is that when you know what problem you're trying to solve, you got to find a way to solve it. How do we solve the problem? Who's going to solve it? By when is it going to be solved? Uh, why are we solving this problem again? Right? All of these questions come in, and Agile helps answer all of those kind of questions. And finally, the enabling piece is a technology. Are we leveraging the right kind of technology? Are we making sure that we are pulling in the most advanced tech we can to ensure we are solving the problems the right way, in the most optimal fashion? And so between design thinking and agile delivery mindset and technology, when you combine these three, these methods and mindsets are a really powerful combination. They will kind of help you understand the problem, go and figure out the right way to solve the problem, and get the right technology to address and deliver the solution to your customers or your users. I talked about valuing the people aspect a lot more in this presentation. So I'll kind of give you an idea what we value in the lab. What are things that we really value in people in the lab? What do we look for, and what we treasure? What do we cherish, and what do we encourage and foster? The first thing is passion. Without some kind of a passion inside, some kind of a drive inside you, it's really hard to get that energy going when you get up in the morning. If you have passion for what you do, you get up and you look forward to the day. When you don't have passion for what you do, it becomes more of a drudgery, right? You want to make sure your day is productive. It's good, it's enjoyable, it's fun. Passion drives purpose in many, many ways. So if you're passionate about your your work that you do, and you're constantly investing in yourself, constantly making sure that I'm growing myself, I'm offering more and more to my colleagues, to my people around me, and to the organization, which then offers more in back, right, back to me. That's where passion comes in. So passion for a purpose is absolutely necessary. Second is any challenge you face, any problem you face, how do we approach that? Do we approach it as an obstacle that we must surmount? Or we look at it as, yes, we got to, of course, surmount it, we got to fix it. But is it also an opportunity for us to grow, right? So as the saying goes, problems are opportunities in disguise, which most people generally would agree with. The issue is when people are told to embrace risk. What does that mean? We look at it a little bit later. But the idea is that you can't really solve a problem or treat a problem as something to grow if you don't embrace that risk that comes with solving the problem, or if you're not running towards the fear but running away from it, then it's hard to solve the problem. And so these are things we look for as well in terms of, are we growing, considering problems as a way to grow than anything else? And third is excellence. Do great work, right? So whether it's technical excellence, which is understand you're producing great code, testing it properly, deploying it, have your CI/CD built in, leveraging the best, newest, most effective, optimal patterns. Process excellence. Are we doing agile properly? Are we being agile more than doing agile? Those sort of things, right? Or do we have a proper process excellence? Are we understanding the steps in the way we deliver value to our customers and optimize them, remove bottlenecks and problems from the system? And third, people excellence. Are we supporting each other? Are we helping each other grow? Are we helping each other succeed? Not just ourselves, but people around us. Are we doing all of those things? So technical excellence, process excellence, and people excellence, these three are absolutely required to do great work. You can't do just one and hope you are successful. You got to do all three. The other value is curiosity, which is always being inquisitive, figure out what's not working, why is it not working, or why is something working better than you thought it would? What are some ways we can improve it? So curiosity or inquisitiveness is a huge, huge plus because it helps you reach across and collaborate with people. If you see a success story somewhere, if you hear of a great story somewhere, you want to understand why that happened, what made them succeed, or somebody didn't do well, or there was a failure in a project. You want to understand why. That curiosity is necessary. You got to experiment. You got to learn by experimenting. Finally, love. I'm not talking about 60s, 70s hate at Ashbury kind of love, or Woodstock. I'm talking about love in terms of caring and affection and true and genuine, authentic relationships. Just this morning, something on my Twitter feed came up from Harvard Business Review. That HBR article, it talked about having friends at work, and said when you have a friend or friends at work, or even a best friend at work, not only does your productivity go up tremendously, Your sense of well-being goes up. You are more inspired. You're more motivated. You're more engaged. Uh, you actually do much better. You have a sense of satisfaction, and you have a sense of support and well-being that's necessary. So having friends at work is actually a very big plus. So when I talk about love, I'm talking about strive for really strong and open, transparent, authentic relationships where people can, in great candor, exchange ideas and opinions without the fears of them being judged. So I'm really talking about trust. I'm talking about alignment. I'm talking about autonomy and those sort of things, right? Those are key things. So when we genuinely care about our people, and give some examples of that later. Um, when you have that in your environment, in your culture, and you feed that culture that way, it actually makes you much more successful. You generate higher performing teams because what's common to most high performing teams is this very strong bond of trust they build up. Right? Trust is an underlying factor, probably the most important factor that kind of determines whether a team is going to be successful or not. And love comes from trust, right? So I think that's why this is necessary to make sure that you are developing an environment, a culture that's based on trust and that's based on mutual respect and strong, authentic relationships. So what did we do during COVID? Or how are we doing during COVID now? What are we doing now? It's still ongoing. How do we stay connected with our people? When we first faced this problem, how can the lab be agile? Not just about the agile methodology and what we practice, but about itself. How can the people be agile? How can the lab help people become more agile, right, while itself staying agile? So it was a very interesting and challenging situation for everybody. I can imagine that's on the phone or listening. It's couldn't have been easy, or it can't have been easy. It's still not easy. But there are some things that we did in our lab to make sure that we were able to somewhat circumvent some of these problems and overcome some of the issues that we were facing because of COVID. And some of those challenges may have been people's personal lives may have been affected quite a bit. Suddenly you got both parents at home working, and then you have kids at home, if they have kids, or other situations like that may have happened. So how do we stay connected? How do we make sure that our work doesn't, get affected too much? And how do we make sure that people are cared for first and foremost? How do we make sure people are taken care of properly? Work can always follow that, but when you take care of people, work follows. So not the other way around. So how do we do that? So one of the first things we started doing was something called tribe check-in, where we would have this bi-weekly session. Earlier it was a weekly session or even a twice-a-week session. We would check in with people. How are you doing? Right? Do you need something? Is everything going okay for you? Right? This genuine check-in from the lab leadership and other people with each other led to this strong sense of belonging that, okay, the lab is here to take care of us, just like we are taking care of the lab. The second thing was the Houston Lab anniversary. We had a painting session we just went to a store, bought a bunch of kits, and we were painting. And we did a live painting session with each other. And so we kind of showed our work to each other. And, I don't think anybody is a Picasso or a Pollock. But it was fun to just do that and to feel connected that even though we can't really be physically next to each other, we can actually exchange these ideas, these interesting moments with each other. These are memories and experiences that actually bonds a team stronger and makes them more productive later. The other aspect is when you work from home so much, like we've been doing, it's really bad for your health. You become very sedentary. You're stuck at your chair and you hardly get up. So there's active exhortation, right? Active push by people to say, get out every now and then, go take a walk. Don't hang around too long at your chair, right? Get up and do something. So we have a channel for that, and I'll kind of show you a glimpse in a second. We also have communities of practice. Another way to stay in touch is we have lots of communities of practice for data science or Agile itself and other things as well, like design, quality. So these are also ways for people to be in touch with each other, making sure that we are hearing each other across all the noise of COVID. Celebrate success, right? Celebrate events, birthdays, lab anniversaries, work anniversaries, those sort of things. How do we do that? Make sure that there's a way to publicize that. Make sure there are. We recently had a pizza party in Calgary. So basically you can go out in Calgary apparently, so it's okay. But the point is that we are able to celebrate success. That is necessary, and you want to make sure to celebrate people and their victories over whatever their adversity they may have faced. We had a live cooking session recently that somebody did, which was a great success. Along the lines of fitness, we also had counting a challenge, like steps challenge. How many steps can you do in a day? And we formed teams, and we would do that. At the end of the 30-day period, a month, we figured out who the winners were, and they all got a gift card, that kind of thing, right? So these are ways for people to feel connected every now and then, making sure that it's not all about the work, what is there, what needs to get done. But if you lose the humanity, if you lose the human nature behind it, then what loses purpose, what loses meaning? And that's really important to understand. We have gaming days every Friday that some of the developers run. Then there's also this social relationship outside of work. There are people that run together. Once it was okay to run together, people do run and go running together, that kind of thing. Right? Just friendships that are born in the lab that sustain outside of the lab as well. And that's to the point I was making earlier, that when you have friends at work, your sense of well-being, your productivity, your sense of comfort in what you're doing, all of that go up, all of that increase. So here's a quick snapshot of our Teams. We use Microsoft Teams. It's an internal collaboration tool, communication tool as well. And so you'll see some of the COPs. Every COP is a committee of practice. So we all these COPs where people work, contribute ideas, and they meet often. We have a fitness and fun and fails channel where we talk about the latest adventures or misadventures people have been doing in terms of fitness. So there's lots of little things that we do that make sure that people are engaged and they feel that trust. So what do all of these, right, ultimately boil down to? If you look at every one of these activities, they're all human-centered. A couple of them are technical in nature, but most of them are human-centered in terms of connecting with the humanity of people, connecting with their personal interests and personal likes and dislikes and tastes, whatever it might be, preferences. So a few things, right? When you do all of these things well and get your people connected, you develop respect, you develop openness, you develop transparency, right? And you develop alignment and autonomy for people. So when you put all these ingredients together, that's what you get ultimately, right? A strong sense of respect for each other. It becomes sort of openness once you're open with people. And there's a sense of transparency around every work that you do, every piece of work that you do, or every interaction that you have with people. And then there's this autonomy and alignment that's built in. So staying connected doesn't just mean exchanging messages, doesn't just mean checking on the welfare of people. Staying connected means we never lose a thread of our purpose of why we exist, why we do what we do. And that message constantly pervades every interaction that we have. That's what staying connected ultimately means. It's not, again, like it's just meaningless conversations or some fun activities. Through every one of these activities, we reinforce the lab values. We reinforce what we stand for and why we'll be uncompromising about that. Why we relentlessly focus on those values as our only way to make sure we have that North Star in our sight, our beacon in our sight, and we don't lose our way. Right? So this is the whole point of staying connected, is to make sure people feel connected as a whole towards a common purpose, which is unlocking value for the greater organization and for each other. So how do we measure some of these things? There's a lot of questions when people have, well, you talk about culture, you talk about these activities that you do, but how do you actually measure what you're doing? It doesn't actually work. So there are two things that we measure. What are those? The first thing is we measure our agility, right? How agile are we? Are we being agile? Are we doing agile? And even if we're being agile, how agile are we, right? If we're doing agile, well, how effective are we in doing those things? So that's one thing, measuring the agile aspect of it. Second is we actually measure our culture, or more accurately, we measure our maturity of our culture. How much are we maturing? Where are we lacking? What are some things that we should do? So how do we go about measuring some of these things? For the agile aspect, we do a survey, right? It's once a month, just about 10 to 12 questions, which give us enough insights into what needs to be improved. And we have taken direct action because of that. We list for people and say, okay, this doesn't work, let's try this. It's an experiment ultimately. So what works, what doesn't work? From an agile point of view, that's what helps. On the other hand, we also measure the cultural maturity. And to do that, there are 4 dimensions we look at. First is, are we user-focused? How user-focused are we? So we look for examples where people have come up with some great way to perform user adoption, where people have come up with a great way to evangelize what we do with our users and customers, get them on board earlier so we can get faster feedback. Getting users on board is like the most critical thing to have success ultimately. Second, how collaborative are we? Collaboration doesn't mean just exchanging messages. Collaboration means you work together to solve a problem. That's what collaboration really means. Working together to solve a common problem that you face. And it necessitates that you work across silos to do that. You can collaborate with your immediate team members, and that's teamwork. When you break the silos, go across, and you cross into a different domain or different area, work with them and solve their problems, and you do that together. That's true collaboration. much of that do we do? Third is embracing risk. I talked about the risk aspect earlier. We should run towards the fear. We should embrace risk. What does that mean? It means, can we take calculated risks? Can we experiment without failure? Can we make sure that we can check out new techniques, new technologies, new methods, and apply it and see what happens? And if something fails, okay, let's backtrack, let's figure out what it is, and let's not do it again. Let's find a different way to fail if we need to. But embracing risk is absolutely vital to innovation. Innovation cannot happen without some risks being taken. If there's no risk being taken, you can't have innovation. It's plain and simple. So essentially, by embracing risk, you are feeding that fuel and fire of innovation. So that's absolutely necessary thing. The last thing we measure is entrepreneurial mindset. Are we coming up with genuine ideas? Is everybody coming up with ideas? How many people are coming up with ideas? What do people want to do? Is there something that's their burning passion? They have to do this. They love to do this, but there's no outlet for them. Whether it's a 20% time that we give people every week to do something on their own, or it might be community of practice where we come with new ideas, or maybe a hackathon. Doesn't really matter. It's the point is how comfortable, how eager, how inspired and motivated are people to share original ideas, something that they want to do themselves, something they feel like would be a good value add to the organization. So it could be as simple as coming up with a completely new way to do something, which may improve the way we do things. Or it might be a totally new product idea that we may embark on and then say, okay, this makes sense, so let's do that. So when you combine these four, making sure our users are the center of everything we do, which is design thinking, being collaborative in everything we do, like Agile, embracing the risk, which is one of the aspects to innovation, and entrepreneurial mindset, which brings all of these together and says, okay, now how do we do this properly, right? With this sentiment of creating new value, unlocking new value for our organization. What are some things that we can do there? So cultural maturity for us, this might be different for different organizations, obviously, but for us, these four things are important enough to measure that our cultural maturity is going up or static or going down. So this is what we measure on a monthly basis, and we see where we need to improve. So quality is necessary and very, very important in any product. Quality builds trust. Quality leads to trust. You can't have trust without quality. So when we talk about user adoption, we talk about collaboration, we talk about embracing risk, or we talk about entrepreneurial mindset. The measure of what you do is often by the quality of what you deliver. People obviously judge you by your quality of what you create. That's why some companies succeed and others don't. They may have the same offering, very similar product, same features even. But if one is better quality, that's always going to win, even if it's more expensive. And there are plenty of examples of that. So the key thing is we have started off Quality Matters Week just this week today, and we are already having some active discussions around why quality matters. What is the point of quality? Why should we measure it? And why should we manage it? Why should we make sure we give it primacy? Right? Why is quality so critical? So this whole discussion on quality this entire week. So these are some other things that foster innovation. When you look at what innovation is about, it's about making things better. When you want to make things better, it's got to be better quality. You can't say I've made something better and it breaks down. Then it's not better anymore, right? So innovation is also about improving quality, not just the experience of the people using it and the immediacy of it. So it's got to be sustainable. It's got to be high quality. It's got to satisfy the need in a better way and make sure that it is also cost effective. It can't be way more expensive than what it was. Sometimes ROI doesn't justify that for the user. So it's got to be cost effective as well. So there are all these little constraints which actually help innovation happen because there are boundaries to it. So I talked about the human aspect quite a bit. Maybe I'll dwell for a couple of minutes on some of the technology aspect of it as well. From this picture, I can tell you that we are looking at a lot of these things. Some of these things have already been used in the way we do things in our products in the lab that we've built over the last year and a half. And there are some things that we will look at in future towards building as well. So that's pretty much all I can say about this in terms of the content of it. I can't really go into too much detail. So what have we created in the lab, right? What are some things that we've actually done? So from the point of view of hiring the right people, giving them the right methods and tools and techniques, making sure the right mindset exists, making sure the right technology exists, making sure the right culture exists. All of these things I said are feeders into what innovation is about. Ultimately, you got to produce something. You got to create something. You got to deliver something, and the something must be of value. So there are 4 different things that we're working on right now, and that our customers have used, our internal customers users have used, and they like a lot. There's a tremendous value unlocked by each of these. I can't go into too much detail on any of these, but I can tell you, something like supply chain. What we're doing with supply chain, it's about optimizing the way people buy things. It's about maximizing the value of the time they spend on purchasing things for the organization. It's prescriptive and predictive in the nature of how it operates. Or in the case of terminal optimization, the one in blue that you see to the left, it's about how do we remove bottlenecks from our pipelines so we deliver our value, which is oil faster. Right? How do we do that? How do we make sure that we remove bottlenecks, as I mentioned, but also optimize the flow path or pipeline integrity? How do we make the proper informed decisions around threat assessment and risk? So all of these products, they have tremendous value unlocked for the organization. Many of them deal directly with the safety of the workers in the field. And many of them deal with, obviously, the fiscal stuff, which is, hey, are we buying the right things? Does it make sense to buy this? Who else supplies this? All of those sort of things in the supply chain field. So they're different products in many ways, but they all lead to very similar outcomes, which is our business loves these products that we created in a very, very short time that the lab has been in existence, practically since like February last year in Calgary and April last year in Houston. So ultimate outcome of everything that I told you, I've been talking about, has been so far in a very short time, these 4 really amazing, very strong, highly innovative, and cutting edge products leveraging the very latest in technology. That's what we created. As the talk converges into a point of, is Agile all about just software stuff that we do? I would like to say no, it goes beyond that. And so what are we doing in terms of non-software agility, areas where software doesn't directly apply? As an example, I have sessions scheduled with HR where I'll be delivering a session on storytelling, doing some Agile training for them. How can Agile help HR achieve their goals faster, better, in a more incremental fashion, iterative fashion? The legal team has done a pretty phenomenal job of leveraging Agile and lean tools and developing great products that they own, whether it be analysis or reports or processes that they own. But they've actually used Agile to do some of that work, and they have enjoyed great success. There's a big internal article that was published by the legal community internally at Enbridge talking about how Agile has helped them quite a bit. The supply chain, as I mentioned to you, has internally delivered another product of their own using Agile. I recently was fortunate enough to deliver a couple of sessions on Agile to about 350, 370 people from the supply chain community inside Enbridge. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in what Agile can do for non-software as well. That's a pretty amazing demand pull for the kind of methodology that is not just about, okay, how do you do this, but how do you become this? And what are the mindsets you need to change to actually accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in a more optimized fashion, in a more effective fashion? And so in conclusion, I want to kind of re-emphasize something I mentioned to you earlier. This may seem like I'm repeating myself, which I am, but it's for a good reason. It's because these are things we take very seriously in the lab, and these are things we value tremendously. So it's worthwhile for me to repeat it one more time to make sure that I conclude in the way that I felt I should conclude, which is, number one, value your people more than anything else. Your people are the most important asset. So at no point should you value your people less than anything else. Your people are your absolute best asset. There's nothing you can do without your people. So value humans, value your people more, and the most, I guess, more than anything else. Number two, make sure you provide them with the best tools, techniques, and methods. Whatever's available, right? What is the most optimal? What is the best possible things that are available? Make sure you offer that to them. Cultivate, create an environment where the right mindset can exist. And what is that you need to define for your organization, whatever that might mean. But make sure that that mindset is something that leads you towards success, leads you towards sustainable success. Maybe there's a mindset of efficiency, which is do more with less, for example. That's a different kind of mindset. And maybe for some people, that might result in burnout because they feel like, oh, I got to get 5 people doing the work of 10 people. Maybe that's where people's mindset is at. So mindset doesn't necessarily mean positive mindset. So make sure the right mindset exists. And that's very important. If you're a leader in any capacity, it's your job, your duty, your responsibility that you are creating that environment where the right kind of mindset pervades the entire organization. And as far as technology is concerned, be judicious about what you're trying to do. Artificially trying to force fit something that doesn't work because it's a cool thing to do can be counterproductive. So just make sure you're using the right technology to solve the right problems. Sometimes complex problems require complex things to solve them, but not always. So that's where this discrimination comes in terms of innovation. Innovation is not necessarily about applying advanced technology. It's just applying an advanced way of thinking towards solving your problem. And finally, culture is the most important thing. I want to just dwell on this for a few seconds because this is the fabric that holds everything together, right? I believe it's a culture. There's a fabric that holds everything together. When you miss out on culture, when you miss out on these aspects, what's going to happen is there are big gaps that are created, and through those gaps is where things tend to go down. And people forget things, or people miss things, people overlook things. So, fabric that you're trying to create for your organization should necessarily include the proper culture you're trying to create. So, when you put these 5 things together, that's when you get true innovation. Right? I just want to make sure I clarify that one more time. The reason why we talked about values so much earlier was values endure, right? Today you have agile, tomorrow you have something else. Today you have design thinking, tomorrow you may have something else. Today you have AI and ML or something else. Those things are almost transient to some extent. They will evolve and shift and move and maybe go away, and something else may take their place. But values endure. Values are almost eternal, right? When you're uncompromising about your values, when you hold fast to your values, and those values should be human-centered values, always, without exception, then you know you're on the right path. So I want to conclude by just saying that innovation is not something that you pursue directly. What you pursue are the enablers of innovation. Let innovation happen organically. It will, if you give it a chance. Make sure the environment around it is conducive for the innovation to happen. And for that, these 5 ingredients are what we found work for us. For you, it might be something else, but it's a good start for everybody. Thank you. Back to you, Nat.
Thank you. Thank you, Sesh. We do have a few questions, so
Sure.
I will go ahead and read these off in the order that they were voted up in. If you definitely want to see one of these questions that have been published, announced in the time that we have, please make sure to vote for it. So Sesh, how do you start building an agile mindset in a place where the culture isn't mature enough for it?
It's a really good question. So it's a pretty common question, and it's not just a common question; it's a common situation, right? When you're trying to introduce change, one of the first things you're going to encounter is resistance. And the reason I'm going to kind of deviate from that question a little bit by saying I'm going to kind of generalize it to some extent. How do you introduce successful change is the real question that's being asked, right? So I was reading this article, and I actually am doing a course right now with IDEO on designing change. So it's kind of timely. A lot of it happens to be people don't necessarily fear or resist change. They fear or resist the impact the change may have on them, which is opaque, right? So in many cases, people foist change upon people without telling them, or leaders foist change upon people without telling them why the change is happening, why it's necessary. So a few things. Number one, explain why this change is happening, or what the change is, why is it happening, why it's necessary. And one thing that most people never do, what will happen if we don't do this, or if we didn't do this? For example, if we didn't apply this architecture to this problem, what would happen? So people talk about what will happen if we do it, but very few people talk about what would happen if we didn't do something. So I think it's necessary to kind of explain what it is. So coming back to the question of inculcating some kind of an agile mindset or any kind of mindset in people, it's about explaining the why behind it, explaining the reasoning behind it, and what would happen if we didn't do it. In case of Agile, one thing can be done is you have small teams, pilot teams that are successful. And we've done that in my previous organization. This is exactly what we did. We started off with a very small team that was starting to practice it and had some really good results very early on. That started attracting more attention from other people. And they're like, oh, how do we get in on this action, right? And so other teams started taking part in it. And they started saying, well, can you train us in doing what you're doing here? It seems like people are having fun. So a lot of it is about quick wins. and quick wins demonstrate the credibility of the system you're trying to install. It's difficult when you have immediate failure, and the naysayers are going to be stronger because of that. So make sure you pick something that you can win right away, and you demonstrate that, and make sure it's a small enough risk at the beginning that you can actually show some learning from that as well. If you take on too big of a risk early up front, it's going to be more of a challenge. Not that it can't be done, but it'll be more of a challenge. So I would start with number one, understanding what the change is, clarifying that, making sure you repeat to yourself 1,000 times, that you're clear, your message is on point and spot on. And number two, find pilot teams that can work with you to make it happen. Spread, celebrate every small win, publicize it, open up for transparency. Tell anybody, hey, you want to come see how we do things? Why don't you come on by? Do a lunch and learn, explain the way you do things. These are all practically things we've done in our previous organization, and what we're doing here in the Enbridge Technology and Innovation Lab as well. We do exactly this. So I would say start with that, and you will pretty much see a lot of success coming your way.
Thank you.
Next question. Sorry.
So Im Harris said, I agree that people's mindset and attitude are essential. What do you do when you find the wrong fit in the team, i.e., not the right mindset and attitude?
That's really that's a really good question. It's a difficult situation when you find that happening. Very difficult situation. I'm not going to pretend it's not. I face a situation. I'm sure most of you have faced this at some point or the other, where you've hired people and they've been very good technically, but then somehow the fit doesn't exist. It can happen. So a couple of things. If you read the book Radical Candor, I think that's a really good book to read and be open and transparent about your dealings with that person. It's not about the person so much, but it's more about their behaviors and mannerisms and stuff they exude from themselves. So what you want to do is address those behaviors and talk about what are some things that they can do to kind of fix that. But before you start any of the stuff, this open conversation is necessary. Be specific about what you've seen, what impact it has had on other people, the impact it's having on them, impact it's having on the team and on the entire organization. When people realize that the behaviors they are exhibiting are going beyond just themselves and their immediate team to a larger group, it's calling into question the credibility of the team, of the group, or of the entire administration. And they'll realize the impact is pretty severe. Now, there are people who will take the feedback and do well with it. They will respect the feedback, they will act upon it, and they will handle it. But there are people who will not do that. Right? There are some people who won't take the feedback. So you have both situations. So based on whatever protocol you have developed in your company for dealing with such things, you got to sort it out. Maybe it's just maybe not the right fit, but maybe they're fit somewhere else. So the first goal is to make sure that we coach them, right? See if you can address that problem of behavior. If you can't do that, okay, what else is a better fit for them, right? Where else would that fit better? If it's a serious behavioral problem, then you can't really pass the problem to somebody else. You got to own it. You got to deal with it. So passing the problem just makes you lose your credibility. Nobody will trust you again, because they're like, oh yeah, this person just passed the problem to me. Now I have to deal with this. So they lose respect for you. If it's a serious behavioral issue that cannot be fixed by coaching, or look into other things. So whether it's agile mindset or a fit or culture or whatever it might be, a lot of it can just be done with an open conversation, honest, transparent conversation about what effect it's having and why it's necessary to be this way or that way, because that's what they signed up for. When you sign up to join a company, you sign up to actually absorb the culture and be part of the culture. You're immersed in that culture. If you're going to be fish out of water there, then you got to make a decision for yourself. So it's a delicate conversation based on where it's headed, but you must have it with respect. And you might have it, with firm compassion. Compassion is necessary. People lose that sense of empathy. And they become almost ruthless in these conversations. They become rough, or they become overly tough. That's not going to be productive. You got to demonstrate empathy from your side. You got to demonstrate compassion from your side and explain your position clearly. You do that, you articulate that, you tell them, you will support them, you'll help them be what they want to be, help them change their behaviors or help them fit their mindset. You try your best, right? Ultimately, you got to decide this way or that way, but you got to give it a best shot.
Thank you. So how do you increase innovation within a team that adopts hybrid or whatever Paul methodology with respect to change management and automation while maintaining productivity?
So the question is, how do you increase innovation in a team that does a lot of automation work, and you want to take them away from that a little bit to doing more creative things, right? Is that the approximate question? While maintaining existing work, existing productivity?
Very, very close.
Okay.
The team is using a hybrid or whatever fall methodology.
Yep, understood. Yeah. Okay.
And they'd like to increase innovation in regards to change management and automation.
Okay, that's an interesting question. The first point I would like to make is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? I mentioned that earlier. Sometimes innovation for innovation's sake may not be the right answer. So we got to figure out, why is it necessary for this team to innovate? Are they in a position to innovate? Do they have the tools and techniques and mindset we talked about to innovate? What would they do better by innovating? Are their current processes broken down, bad, bottlenecked, stagnant? So sometimes it's just about holding a mirror to the team and saying, hey, here's what we're doing. And we found these bottlenecks, we found these issues. How do we solve them? Take the problem to the team, as most agilists will say, take the problem to the team, right? Tell the team, this is the problem we're having and how would you solve it? One thing that might help is a 20% thing, where you dedicate 20% of your time, or 15%, whatever that time might be, but dedicated time that the team gets to solve a problem. You can sponsor a hackathon where people exercise their creative nature. You can do, I'm not such a big fan of brainstorming sessions, but sometimes that works, or idea storming, as they call it. There's a thing called innovation games, which actually is pretty neat. You might want to give that a try. The other thing is, you want to find out the team's purpose. Has it been diluted over time? Or has the team's purpose been overly solidified over a period of time? Both can be problematic. What I mean to say is, if your team exists to solve one problem and one problem only, that's what they do day in, day out, innovation is not possible. If a team has this purpose so diffused, it's doing a bit of everything, again, it's not possible. So what is needed is focus, but not focus to the point of completely putting blinders on. So let's say in the case of this specific team, if your goal is automation, you're trying to do RPA or different things like that, ask the team a question. How else would you solve this? Maybe some blue sky thinking, right? If these tools didn't exist, what would you do? So asking a lot of questions is the first way to go. But like I said, before you do that, what problem are you trying to solve? Is it worth solving? Is this team geared towards solving that? Does this team have the skills and capabilities? If not, should we upskill them? We have to train them, we have to upskill them. And then what methods and tools and techniques we can provide them to help them reach that point of being able to solve these problems. Problem solving is an acquired skill. You have to learn how to solve problems. It doesn't come naturally to most people. You have to learn how to solve problems. There's a lot of critical thinking, systems thinking you ought to develop inside you to actually get to the point of saying, I understand the whole system, not just a part of it. Therefore, I can have a more optimal solution. So I would start with that. I would start with the purpose of the team. Are they geared towards it? What problem are you trying to solve? What are the current bottlenecks? Where's the idea state? Where do you want to be? Blue sky thinking, idea storming, and all of these different things can certainly help you. And that 20% time that people can creatively do something different, take them away from the mundaneness of everyday work, can be a sure thing to help. Another thing is to bring an outsider in. When I say outsider, I mean somebody from another team which has maybe doing some interesting work. Bring them in for a talk and say, hey, what do you do? How do you solve this problem? What are some techniques you have? So idea sharing, collaboration across teams is also a great way to approach this problem.
Awesome. Thank you. So this next question is on the mindset and method slide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If design thinking, agile delivery, and technology are mindsets and methods that are great at ensuring that teams are solving the right problem, what are some ways to measure that these methods and mindsets are achieving the results in regards to solving the right problem?
That's a good question. And a lot of it comes down to, who are we solving the problem for, right? So example, let's say that I'm solving the problem of uncomfortable seats in a car for long trips, right? That's I'm trying to solve. Maybe the seats are really hard and whatever, they're not supporting you, they don't have lumbar support. So I come up with some innovative ways to say, you know what, I think this would be more comfortable for people driving long distances or sitting in a car for a long time in the Houston traffic or anywhere where you are. Traffic is a given. How do we know it's successful, right? We can look at a few things. How many have we sold? That might be one indicator. How many recurrent sales do we have? Maybe another one. How many referrals do we have? Another one. We also look at what's the customer feedback? What are people saying? Are people responding positively to it? Are they giving us good feedback in the social media? Right, that's a good measure. Or just ask them directly, interview them directly. So understanding if you're solving the right problem, a lot of it comes from the business side. It's a business that wants problems solved for them to align themselves better with the company direction and strategy. So they want something solved. So they approach it, quote unquote, technology side and say, or IT, and say, hey, help us solve this problem. So design thinking helps you understand, are you solving the right problem? And to measure that, you got to go back. And this is where the whole iterative process happens, the user adoption happens, UAT happens, all of these aspects, or wireframing happens. You got to involve the business people right from the very beginning. In many cases, what I've generally seen is business will give you something to solve, and then they'll go away, right? You will spend 6 months trying to solve something and say, oh, I have a solution. When you go back to them and like, oh, that's not the problem I wanted to solve, or this solution doesn't meet my needs. So because Agile is so powerful in making sure the business is constantly engaged with the product owners, you want to build that feedback cycle loop as quickly as you can, get constant feedback, making sure that you are approaching the solution to the problem properly. And that's what they really ultimately want. So to really measure, are we successful in solving the right problem, is to ask the business people, what is your definition of success at the very beginning? If we deliver something to you and you say, yes, this is fantastic, what will make you say that? What are some things that will make you say that? Just ask them. They'll say, well, my referrals have gone up, my sales have gone up 25%, or that my customers are giving me 5 stars. Those are all great indicators. One thing that might help is OKRs, right? If you have shared OKRs, which is objectives and key results, if you have OKRs defined well and you're aligned on the OKRs, then this won't be a mystery anymore. This is why I love the book Measure What Matters, and I kind of added a bit of a twist to it at the end called Measuring What Matters. But Measure What Matters is a great book if you haven't read it, by John Doerr, and he talks about objectives and key results. When the business and your IT department are aligned on the OKRs, then you know exactly what the measurement of success is going to be. That's one fail-proof way of doing it, because you're always updating your OKRs if you go out of sync, and you do that jointly together in collaborative fashion. So I would strongly recommend OKRs as a way to get started.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Let's see here. How do you measure the maturity of the culture? Do you have any framework to measure that?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, and so here we talked about this. How do you measure culture maturity? What are things we look for? So these are 4 dimensions I mentioned. One of the things I mentioned was that these 4 dimensions apply to us because we feel they're more suited to what we do and how we are, who we are. This may not be what you may be looking for. So we look for these 4 things, and we talk to people. We come up with examples of what has happened in each of these 4, and we grade them internally. We grade them, and then we see internally, are we going up or down, or are we flat, right? Are we regressing? Are we progressing? Are we just stable and we need to really go up? We measure that every month. And we measure that by examples of what people have done, some results that people have seen, the impact people have had with their work. And it's both qualitative and quantitative. But we know that we are making progress or not because we agree upon a scale, and we measure also on the scale pretty transparently. And that's how we know if you're successful or not in the cultural maturity. Different organizations at different stages, in different industries, may have different ways of measuring culture. A startup may have a completely different way of measuring their culture versus an established company, for example, or a startup culture within an established company may have a different way of measuring than a regular startup, for example. So it depends on what you see your success as. How do you define your success? What do you feel values more to you? And where do you want the outcomes to be ultimately? Where do you want to be 2 years from now or 5 years from now? If that's where you want to be, is spot X, then everything you do should take you towards that X mark. If it's taking you away, you're not making progress. So you got to define what the outcomes are, what you're looking for, and then set in motion and set in process those things that will let you measure them to see if you're getting there or not. An example would be, let's say you value openness as part of one of your cultural things that you do. We value openness. So, hey, how do you measure openness? very difficult to do. At first sight, is hard to do, but actually it's pretty straightforward. You look at things like, are people responding to you well in surveys? Right? If you have a survey and you should see the responses from people, are people having open conversations with each other? What do managers think? Are the employees facing concerns? Are we finding problems way later in the game when it should have been found earlier? These are direct indicators of whether culture is open or not, and you can actually detect it like that. It can come from your technical practices. Actually, the way you code can tell you if your organization is open or not. If people blindly sign off on the code review without necessarily doing the due diligence, then you know it's not an open culture, right? There's not much openness there. But if people are openly debating things and openly talking about what's important, what's not, and why something should be done. If you see dissent, if you are encouraging dissent and dissent happens, that's a very strong sign there's openness. So even things like openness, we just saw a few minutes ago would have been like, how do you measure that? But now we see actually we can measure those. So you have to see, you have to know what you prioritize, what's important to you as an organization, as part of cultural maturity, what do you want to be, and what are some measures that will help you get there. They can be qualitative and quantitative. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So from your experience, how long does that cohesiveness happen in a team that's on this journey?
How long, sorry, could you repeat that? How long does a cohesive, I lost the second part.
From your experience, how long does that cohesiveness happens in a team that is on this journey?
How long does it take for the team to be cohesive ultimately? Okay. It depends on a few things. It depends on, traditionally, you can look at the Tuckman model, which is very, very common, forming, forming, norming, storming, norming, performing, and reforming, and those sort of things. You can also look at from the point of view of what does cohesiveness mean? What does cohesion or cohesiveness mean? It could mean people are rowing the same direction. It may also, you got to be careful. It can also mean artificial harmony, where people are afraid to challenge each other. So they, on surface, everything is just really great and smooth and peachy, right? But beneath the surface, there is a massive amount of undercurrent, which is actually slowing you down and pulling you down. You may not see that. So when we say team cohesiveness, I'm going to take it this way. I'm going to take it from this point of view that when you see team cohesiveness, you're talking about trust exists, respect exists, people are strong integrity. So there's this thing about trust being comprised of three different things. There's competency, which is, well, you know what you're doing, but you're doing it well. Second is benevolence. Whatever you do, you're doing it not to hurt other people. Third is integrity. You're doing it for the right reasons, right? So when you look at competence, benevolence, and integrity, these three form the elements of trust. If you detect those things on your team is cohesive. If you see your team challenging each other and they're respecting each other and then going off and having a beer or something at the end of the evening, they are cohesive. So you don't actually measure cohesiveness on a scale of 1 to 10. You look at behaviors, right, and see what behaviors are there on a scale of 1 to 10. And together, behaviors, these cultures we talked about, the way the team interacts with each other, the outcomes they produce, the language they use, all of that are a barometer for the team cohesion. It could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to start that process to get gelled. It could take up to 2 years for a team that's constantly shifting. So you got to have team stability as a norm. Team working norms have to exist. So team cohesion, I just want to clarify, it's not about team harmony. That may or may not be a good thing. When I say harmony, I mean a negative sense of harmony, where people just want to be friends and they don't want to upset each other. Team cohesion means people are rowing the same direction with the same purpose and are willing to disagree with each other when they need to, but they're all committed to the same direction. I hope
Thank
that
you.
helps. Sure.
We have one more question,
Sure.
and this one's kind of tough. How do you find passion when the organization is becoming toxic and the toxicity is not being addressed by management?
Okay. It is a tough question. That's an easy answer. Leave, right? I mean, so I maybe being half facetious. You have to make a decision for yourself. Why are you still there, right? If you think you can change what's around you, and you can, well, you should exist there, and you should make passion your driver. But if you feel you've lost the battle, and it's so difficult and so impossible for me to succeed, and I'm losing sleep, and I'm not able to function like a normal person, my question would be, why should you inflict that upon yourself? Find a place that values you, find a place that you can contribute and be more successful. So the direct answer would be, it depends on the situation. But I think that the more important thing is your mental well-being. That matters more than anything else, in my opinion. Your physical and mental being are the most important things. Everything else can come later, right? If you feel you're negatively affected by some of these things, negatively impacted by these things, think about if that's the right place for you, and you're giving it your all, you're getting nothing in return. That's an abusive relationship. You don't want to be there. So my advice would be to seriously think about your priorities, what you really value. Can you make a change? Are the people willing to listen to you? Is change taking hold? You have hope, stay on. Absolutely, by all means, do it. I think that's where there's a difference between being intelligent and having wisdom. Knowing the difference between when the change can take hold and not is necessary. So use that power of discrimination that humans have to know, yes, this is the right place for me, and I can stick it out there and make it, or goodbye, right? I have a different place to go where I'm valued more. So it's a decision you got to make, but only you know your situation best.
Sesh, thank you so much for sharing today, and thank you all for attending today's session. We would love your feedback. You can complete a survey for this session by logging into sketch.com, locating the session, and then clicking the feedback survey button. If you go back there tomorrow, the recording will be available from the video stream button. We hope you all enjoy the rest of the Agile Shift and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and I really appreciate and value your time. It was a privilege and an honor for me to present here today. So thanks again for the opportunity. Thanks to everybody.